Welcome to This Week's OK at Work with myself, Sarah Sawyer, and my colleague, Russell Berger, both attorneys at Offit Kurman. And today we are talking about agency investigations and complaints that employees might make to these agencies. So EEOC and state equivalents, the Department of Labor. Often I know clients will get correspondences from employees, or employees might say, I'm going to file something, or I'm going to report this, or I'm going to report this violation or this issue, and I think this is a systemic issue. I'm going to report this to the DOL. And clients will call and say, well, what do I do with this? And when you get that question, Russell, what do you do?
I mean, pretty much the first piece of advice is going to be, what's going on? Have you investigated this? Is there merit to this? Are we doing things right? Um, as you and I have talked about before, someone's pointing out smoke. We have to investigate to see whether there's fire or not. And as we would with any fire, if it's there, we got to put it out, and we've got to address it, and we've got to remediate it immediately. Because the last thing you want is for an employee to take whatever the complaint is to an agency that's going to investigate it, and then the agency reaches out to you, and your response is, yeah, we knew this complaint was being made, but we figured you'd ask about it, so we haven't done anything for the last month while this process ran its course. Like, you're in a much stronger position to deal with those agencies if the problem's already been remediated.
And you also want to have a sense of what's going on as well. You don't want to be blindsided. You want to see kind of what's going on, whether you can fix it, whether there's any issues, whether you can address the issue with the employee to prevent them having to feel like they need to report it. Because any type of investigation by any agency, whether it be the Department of Labor, EEOC, or any state equivalents, take a long time. So once they get involved, it's not a quick, easy process. It's not something that just happens overnight and they say, oh, okay, it looks like you're compliant, we're done. It's government workers, they're usually understaffed. There's people go on leave. A lot of things can happen. So sometimes it can drag out a year or two. I mean, I've seen these things drag out for a really long time, especially since COVID. It's getting a little bit more on track now, but during COVID, we saw them drag out for a really long time. So, really, if you're able to prevent that happening, and by prevent that happening, I don't mean tell the employee they can't report it, to be clear. Yes, you can't do that. But, that's just, you want to have your arms around it, see what's going on, see if you can address it. And it's definitely not something to ignore.
Yeah, I guess on that point, it should be clear, you can't retaliate against the employee that made the complaint. We've talked about retaliation here previously, but you can't retaliate against them. So yeah, I mean, I think like you were saying, like, hop on it, address it, fix it, be proactive about it, be able to say we've addressed this. If there's nothing to address because there are no issues, then you kind of gather your facts and line those things up, because ultimately, depending on the type of investigation, you're probably going to have to write some kind of position statement or other letter back to the agency. We write those a lot, and as a piece of advocacy. And if there's nothing to deal with, you want to be able to show why and have that lined up and have your proof in order. I mean, like anything else, you're probably going to want to put a hold in place so documents don't get destroyed. That's obviously a more ministerial task. And the other last point I wanted to make on this topic is that when you resolve disputes with an employee that's made a complaint with an agency, as a matter of law, you often cannot require that employee to waive their ability to report something to an agency. What you can have that employee waive is their right to make a recovery as a result of anything they report to an agency. So, for example, if an employee claims they were harassed, and you try to settle that and resolve that claim with them, and you do, the settlement agreement is going to say that they're still permitted to share information with the EEOC or whoever it might be, but that they have no financial interest in the outcome of any further claims against the company.
Yeah, and that's really a key distinction that, we always make sure it's an every agreement. And you want to have that in there to protect yourself on, if you've already paid the employee and having them waive their rights and things. So definitely a key distinction. The other thing I would say too, as far as just these investigations, especially as it relates to wage and hour claims, if you have a larger company, especially, or you have a lot of hourly employees, there's always a high potential that there's something you're doing wrong, is what I found, right? And there's not always an occasion for people to really want to dig into and audit their policies and their procedures and broadly outside of that one employee. But if you've got one employee and you settle something with them and you resolve something with them, it definitely is beneficial to take a broader look and say, all right, if this happened and went wrong here, what else could potentially be going wrong? And often it's inadvertent. It's very rare that we have clients that are like intentionally breaking the law. They know it's wrong and they're just doing it anyway. I mean, it happens, but most of the time it's some type of inadvertent thing that's happening, some payroll practice, something that's just not right. And it's a good opportunity when these things happen, even though it doesn't feel good or feel like an opportunity at the time, it feels burdensome. It can be a good opportunity to really dig in and make sure that everything, take a little look at your house.
Yeah, well, and especially with wage, across the company type issues with wages and payment processes. Easy to say we should identify problems and remediate them. Those are more complicated problems to remediate. So that's something, while in general, yeah, take a look at that and consider how you're going to remediate. But what that looks like, I mean, that should be really, given a lot of consideration and thought through and discussed with counsel. Because it's not so easy sometimes to just say, oh, well, I'll cut $1,000 check and I'm good. It can be a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah, certainly. Well, thanks, Russell, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Sarah.